What's going on, everyone? Happy Saturday morning, Christmas Eve edition of BYP. Rich Quinones here. Appreciate everyone always keeping us locked in and tuned in. Don't forget, you can follow me on social media at Rich Q on Twitter and IG, Facebook, and the like. So I wanted to kind of just get into the passing of Franco Harris. We wanted to do a spot earlier this week, but had so much other content to cover and ground, but I really wanted to take a couple moments because as a football historian, absolutely just a diehard football fan, as many of you guys know, and was so fortunate and blessed many years ago to work a couple seasons in NFL films. Got to work extra time in the vault, which if you're a kid, you're growing up, you're watching NFL films, you're watching inside the NFL, you're watching all the great pregame shows, you're watching Sunday football all over the place, right? And for me, as a kid, I never forget, always the NFL films, and I would always see this one play where it's caught out of the air by Franco Harris, and I never knew really the extent, the magnitude of the Immaculate Reception. So obviously, with Franco passing several days ago on the 20th at the age of 72, which is way too young, very, very unfortunate. The Raiders and the Steelers play later this evening. So it's the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception, which technically was on the 23rd. Obviously, today's the 24th. But with that being said, they're going to honor that event. And obviously, you honor the life and times of one Franco Harris. The other, what's kind of interesting before we get into that, not a lot of people know, only two uniform numbers have been retired by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joe Green's number 75, Ernie Strautner's number 70, who was a player and then a coach, and obviously had his hand in the early stages of what became a wonderful, just a ridiculous dynasty in the 70s, which I'm going to get to. But the Immaculate Reception, the play itself, right? Everyone has their own theories. The riot theory, the trap theory, the clip theory, right? And it's just, to me, that kind of exemplifies the player that Franco Harris was, because he's a guy, you never give up on a play, right? As a running back, you're fighting, you're scratching and clawing for yardage. And it's always about being at the right place at the right time. And you go back and you watch that play over and over. And then you watch the Gowdy call in real time. And then you watch the fact that the fans, I had this conversation with a couple of friends the other day, like, imagine today a play like that happening and fans try to come on the stadium, on the field, and it's just celebratory, right? Everyone's ecstatic. There's just juice and energy and passion and just love for the play in the moment. You can't get away with that. But Franco Harris, I think, was an exceptional running back. Now, of course, I didn't see Franco Harris play. Even as a kid, the tail end of his career, he had 1,000 yards with the Steelers in '83, then had the cup of coffee with Seattle in '84 and retired. I mean, it's tough to see some of these great players wearing different jerseys. That's conversation for another day. But if you think about what he was able to do, 6 straight 1,000-yard seasons, okay, 74 to 79, he had 8,000-yard season totals. He averaged 4.1 yards a carry. I believe when he retired, he did at that time had the third most rushing yards. If you add in his yards as far as receptions, balls caught out of the backfield, and 9 touchdowns as a receiver, plus the 91 as a rusher, that gives him 100 right on the nose. He was a great player at Penn State. But the reason I always remember the name Franco Harris, because Franco Harris was a South Jersey guy. So for myself, when I moved from New York to South Jersey many, many moons ago, we would always talk about the great players that came out of South Jersey. And Franco Harris was born in Fort Dix, went to RV, ran Cocos Valley, and then obviously had a great career at Penn State before he was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And his father, Cade Harris, was a black soldier, served in World War II, stationed in Italy, met his mother, who was a war bride. And, that became he would talk about his mixed race and ethnicity. And people would always remember, back in the day in the 70s in Pittsburgh, they would say Franco's Italian Army. But the play itself, you can dissect it, you can gloss it over, you can fine tooth comb it. It is perhaps the greatest play in NFL history. And there are a couple things that I think we lose sight in. So that play itself in 72, the Steelers didn't go on to win the Super Bowl, right? Everyone thinks that catapult. No, I mean, you run into a buzzsaw in Miami. 73, the Raiders got their measure of revenge out in Oakland, where they waxed them 33-14. They actually led that game 26-7, I believe, and they shut down Franco Harris. 10, 11 carries for 29 yards. Blanda kicked 4 field goals. I think Willie Brown had an interception return for a touchdown. So again, Steelers lose to the AFC title game, the game to Miami. Miami obviously has their mini dynasty undefeated, blah, blah, blah. We know the rest is history, as they say. And then the Steelers finally, right, they get over that hump in 74 when they beat the Minnesota Vikings 16-6 in the Super Bowl. Franco Harris was the MVP. He had a wonderful game. I mean, go back and watch some of the footage, the way he ran the ball so hard, 34 carries, $158 in a Super Bowl against that defense. Back in the day, the Purple People Eaters that had wall-to-wall Hall of Famers. The beauty with that in 74 is that game, you know, the weather was just crappy. So what are you going to do? Bradshaw is not going to turn around and sling it 30 times. I think Terry Bradshaw might have thrown or completed 7 or 8, 9 passes in that game. I'd have to double check. But you saw the progression from the Pittsburgh Steelers, 71, 6-8, 72, 11-3, 73, 10-4, the Raider loss. I'm sorry, 73, 10-4. The Raider lost 74, the Super Bowl. And then they went on and they had their runs. And Franco was part of the history of the NFL, right? I believe if you can't talk about it as if, okay, when I talk about the history of the league, when I talk about the history of the NBA or MLB or NHL or the NFL, there are certain plays that come to mind right away. In the NFL, it almost seems as though that play, you know, you want to throw in the catch, Dwight Clark, Joe Montana, that's fine. You want to talk about Super Bowls and Marcus Allen running through daylight, Willie Brown with the pick, you know, Tyrese catch. There's so many moments, but the Immaculate Reception for me growing up and then watching all the NFL films and seeing that highlighted, it kind of like, it almost encapsulates our youth to some extent. And that team, like the dynasty that was, it's incredible. I want to share this with you for a moment because it's just fascinating. If you're a Steelers fan, you know exactly where I'm going with this. So think about the buildup and how you draft and how you become a dynasty in the NFL. And you can sit there and say it was different 20, 30, 40 years ago. Fine, have at it. 71. Now, mind you, I'm not going to include you know, the Terry Bradshaws of the world. But you get the quarterback that you need, right? 71, they draft Jack Ham out of Penn State. 72, they draft Franco Harris with the 13th pick. By the way, sorry, Philadelphia Eagles fans. You guys had the 14th pick and decided to draft the quarterback out of Florida. John Reeves, I believe his name was. Okay, John Reeves. So 73, the Steelers also drafted JT Thomas, which was a good corner. 74, you might be able, and by the way, they had Larry Brown in 71. 74, I believe if you ask the longtime NFL guys and all the great historians of the game, the 74 draft by the Pittsburgh Steelers might be the greatest selection, the greatest draft picks of all time. They draft Lynn Swann, okay, in the first round, USC. They draft Jack Lambert in the second round out of Kent State. They draft John Stallworth, in the fourth round, right? I mean, out of Alabama A&M, right? Louisiana Lightning, as they would say. And then in the fifth round, they draft Mike Webster. And oh, by the way, that's not even mentioning Donnie Shell, who was a Hall of Famer that went undrafted as well. So you're saying 5 players, but 4 in one draft, wall-to-wall Hall of Famers. That is how you build a dynasty. And it revolved around the ground game, right? Whether it was Harris, whether it was guys like Rocky Bleier, whether it was just establishing the run with that great offensive line to open up the hole. So Bradshaw was able to go down the field to Swann or Stallworth, not to mention the defense with Ham and Lambert and Blunt and Shell and Mean Joe Green. it's just, that is the heyday, folks. That's how you build those great dynasties. And Franco's place in that dynasty, right? Kind of that heartbeat. It's there, it's cemented. And that play against the Raiders, again, for my money, you can argue that is the greatest play in NFL history. It's not as though it derailed the Raiders, because again, they got their measure of revenge and they ultimately won, a couple Super Bowls going forward. But that kind of jump started that Steelers dynasty. And we always talk about what happens if certain plays don't occur, right? I mean, think about this. If Montana throws it out of bounds and they lose that game, do we get the Niners dynasty? Do we? I mean, who knows? If there's a couple plays with the Dallas Cowboys in the 90s, maybe the slant, are we, the Harper play, are we getting the Cowboys dynasty? The tuck rule, the tuck game, Tom Brady. If Bledsoe never gets knocked out of the game, are we talking Tom Brady and the New England Patriots? That's how I think the sports world and the gods work. And it worked that way in 1972 with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Oakland Raiders. And Franco just happened to be right there, right? Right place, right time. That's pretty much what life is all about. All right. Appreciate everyone keeping us locked in for a Saturday edition of BYP. Rich Quinones here. Don't forget, we're sponsored from our good friends over at Played Again Sports. Check them out online. $50 gift cards right now for $40. Those gift cards, if you get them from Dick's or New Jersey malls, you can use them. 1450 Clemensbridge Road in Woodbury. Check them out online. playedagainsports.com. You can / Deptford or New Jersey for all the information, and also TriX57, one of the premier streaming services for local news, weather, and sports in Atlantic City. All right. As always, I appreciate you guys giving me a couple moments. If you like what you see, if you like the content, if you like the video, if you agree, you disagree, not a problem, comment. If you guys can subscribe, that would be awesome. We appreciate it as well. We'll be back here later on in the day. Got some NFL. We already gave you our picks from yesterday that are up on the page as we speak. We got some boxing to do later as well. So we got to get on the road soon. But I also want to get into that Miles Austin situation with gambling in the NFL, and then the officials from the other night against Washington. So a lot of stuff. We might go live sometime today or tomorrow. But as always, I appreciate you guys keeping me locked in. Appreciate the time for a couple moments. Have a good holiday. Enjoy the NFL games, and we will talk to you soon.